One of the more interesting things that to me is not left, right, it's really just common sense. It's the health of our kids that matters. And Robert F. Kennedy brought this up over the weekend during his endorsement of Donald Trump. Here's part of what he had to say, and then we'll welcome on our next guest.
And we talked about, not about the things that separate us because we don't agree on everything, but on the values and the issues that bind us together. And one of the issues that he talked about was having safe food and ending the chronic disease epidemic.
And RFK very focused on the kids as well. He went into depth on that, and that's where I want to welcome on and say good morning to Dr. Christine White, Freedom Pediatrics here in Overland Park. Find her at freedompediatrics.com. The percentage of overweight or obese children in America is right now 50%. That number Dr. White gave me right before we came on air back in the 1970s was 10%. So let's just start. I know there's more to it than just diet, Dr. White, but what is going on in the food industry with the American diet that is causing this obesity in children?
The food industry has been very effective at influencing scientists and government regulatory agencies to get their products into our food. In the 1950s, the industries lobbied to have sugar be the good guy and fat be the bad guy. And there was some science that was done that if you interpreted it a certain way, showed that that could be the case. That science has been disproven since then by many studies. Around the same time in the 50s, our usual fat sources like butter and lard and tallow were being demonized, and we were being told we should be eating processed seed oils, which are artificial oils made in a factory. And so those two things really in the 1950s, 60s became what formed our dietary recommendations and has turned the majority of our food into processed food with refined sugars, refined flours, and artificial seed oils. 70% of the average American kid's diet is processed food, with those three components being the primary components.
Wow. Now, what about the relationship between the food industry, the FDA, and then your industry, doctors, who are just kind of taking all this stuff that clearly there's a lot of money to be made, there's a lot of lobbying going on. They're taking this stuff as settled science, for lack of a better word.
Right. And you could say, well, who's the bad guy here? And first you want to look at industry and say, well, they knew that they were pushing faulty science. And yes, in a perfect world, they would say, wait, let's not do this to the people. But they're there to make money.
Yeah.
Okay. So they have a little blame. But I really think you need to look at our government organizations like the FDA, the USDA, the NIH, Health and Human Services. There is a revolving door of employees and higher ups at the food industry, pharmaceuticals, and our government organizations. So if you scratch my back and approve my product, whether it's pharmaceutical, a food, you get this on the dietary guidelines, maybe you'll have a really nice job in 3 or 4 years. So there is a huge burden of guilt at the government level. Physicians and scientists also have guilt. Some scientists will take a payoff to publish faulty science. Our journals you cannot trust what's written in our scientific journals anymore. And unfortunately, that is what physicians read. They do not go look for the other data and the other science. They take the little sound bite and they go with it. They don't have the time, or they don't have the energy or the desire to look at the truth.
And it is true that our food is more addictive than it's ever been, right?
Yes. So the big food manufacturers have scientists that are able to find products and chemicals and additives that make our food much more palatable, almost addictive, to make you have a bigger dopamine hit when you eat certain foods. And they have made it so that children and adults will go back for those highly palatable sugars, highly palatable fats. I mean, the same area of your brain lights up when you eat sugar as when you do heroin. I mean, it's unreal. So,
wow.
Yes.
Dr. Christine White is here, Freedom Pediatrics in Overland Park. But it's not a one size fits all. It's never just about one thing. Diet's a big part of the reason we have this childhood obesity and adult obesity as well. But what else is factoring into the childhood obesity issues that this country now faces?
So the other big components, I believe, are diet is the elephant in the room. Sleep is a close second. We are supposed to sleep for a certain number of hours a night. We do best. Our hormones stay in much better balance. There's hormones that regulate when we're hungry and when we feel full. And if you do not get enough sleep, those are out of balance. Also, if you don't get enough sleep, your cortisol goes up, which will also cause you to eat highly fat, highly sugared foods, and then you will deposit more of that into your tissues. So sleep is so important, not just the quantity, but also the quality. And so I always talk to families about how is your sleep. It is so important, and it is really not valued in our society.
It's not. It gets way overlooked, and I've mentioned that to you off the air about myself. So diet, sleep, exercise, with kids in particular, how do you try to make all this work? Because, kids are getting on the bus in some cases earlier than they ever have because of busing issues and things of that nature. So you're trying to get them sleep. You're trying to feed them healthily. You're trying to get them outside for exercise. How should you be weaving all this together as a parent?
Right. Our kids are so overscheduled these days. When I was a kid, I would play one sport at a time. My brother and I got to pick one sport, and it wasn't competitive. It was like soccer practice on Thursday and one game on Saturday. The rest of the time, we were outside playing. That was our priority. Our parents cooked our food. Our parents made sure we were in bed, shortly after the sun went down. Our lives these days are too busy. They're too scheduled, and it is not the right thing for our families. So we need to prioritize getting back to how you lived in the 70s. You don't need to be scheduled. You need to be a kid. You need to play outside. You need to eat at normal times, and you need to go to sleep at normal times. And it is okay to do that with your children, and we need to start doing that. That right there would fix a lot of our problems.
Is it like this rat race that we all get caught up in, this, keeping up with the Joneses mentality of this kid's doing 7 sports at a time, we've got to do 7 sports? Is it that much? Is it societal pressure as much as anything, or is it just kind of what we've become accustomed to with each passing generation?
I think it's both. Some of it is pressure, but a lot of it is, it's just kind of the norm. And so we do it. I am noticing more and more parents who are really starting to make good decisions for their children. They're starting to look at the food. They're starting to prioritize their sleep. They're not getting their kids' cell phones until they are in, 10th, 11th grade. They are living a more simple life. They're going back to the basics. And you kind of have to swim upstream. But I think we need to start swimming upstream. Yeah.
And the exercise component, how big is that? What do you look at when you talk about getting outside and exercise? If we're not going to play 3 sports a week, what's the answer on that?
Right. So people always think sports means exercise. Sports does not always mean exercise. It might mean you're standing around until you do your little drill.
That's a good point.
What I want kids to do is have some friends, go run around their block, ride their bikes, go to the creek, catch crawdads, climb trees, go be a kid and get dirty and get bruised and get beat up and come home when it's time for dinner. And it's really not so much that we have to, quote, exercise. We just can't be so sedentary. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be in a sport. You just need to move. And that can be walking or biking or just not sitting around on your computer or your Xbox all day. It's very easy to do. We just need to look at things differently.
Prioritize it,
yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Christine White, Freedom Pediatrics, right here in Overland Park. Find her at freedompediatrics.com. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being here. We so appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.